Here he is, the former legendary Met, played with the Dodgers, Giants, Yankees, of course, as well, the great Darryl Strawberry. Darryl, Joe, and Evan, how are you?
Darryl, how are you, man? It's always a pleasure.
I'm great, Joe and Evan. How you guys doing?
Doing well. You know, I want to start with what's happened in this country now over the last 2 weeks and everything that's gone down with that. And I just want to get your thoughts on that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's sad at what has happened and what has transpired over the last couple of weeks in this country. But I think for a very long time we all should know that we've been way overdue for a makeover in this country. You know, with police brutality and how they've treated African Americans for a very long time, and how they profile on African American. I've been in those situations before, and I'm quite sure more other athletes have too. And it's just really unacceptable, I think, because when you see someone of color who is driving or whatever, it doesn't cause, for the brutality to be the way it should be. Making arrests is legal. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think we've gotten way too far out of control with what has happened. And I think we just need I call it, we need a makeover. We need a whole makeover for this country, and we need to come back to the principles, the biblical principles, and we need to come back to faith, and we need to come back to loving each other. I think we've gotten away from that because I think society has gotten self-centered about who can do what, and the thing about it, guys, is you don't get away with anything today because of social media. They get it on video. You can't get away from it. You can't hide from it. They were able to hide from it from years and years, but there's no hiding now. Is all police officers bad? No. Does some have some real significant problems? Yes. Do they have hatred? Yes. That's something that's been ingrained in them that has to be dealt with, and it can be dealt with, and they need to go through a healing process. That doesn't make all officers bad. That makes some bad apples in your field that have these agendas behind the scene, and eventually they show out when they do run into someone of color most of the time, and they use excessive force, on people like that. And George Floyd's life shouldn't have never been lost over whatever situation it was. He shouldn't have never lost his life.
No question. For you, as a teenager drafted number 1 overall, leaving your family, leaving where you're from, and playing minor league baseball in Tennessee, what was that experience like, and what did you face, especially as a young man leaving where you're from to go play baseball at the professional level? What was that experience overall like?
It was different. It was different going to a totally different place like Tennessee, and I was only really there a month, and I was. It was kind of strange, because I was out of my own elements of, the comfort zone of who I was, and being black and going to all, basically literally all white place, and dealing with a lot of white fans and people having a lot to say, believe me. And I think the year after that, going to Lynchburg, Virginia, I had a lot of racial slurs from the fans and up in the stands in Lynchburg, and I was close to quitting baseball, and people don't have no idea, that I was that close, because I just thought to myself, I signed up to play baseball. I didn't sign up to be, humiliated like this and talked about and called boy and called out of your names and stuff like that, because you strike out or something, and fans would say, you're not that good, and they would, racial slurs would come out of them. It was just a horrible time in there. And I just thought, man, I didn't really sign up to play baseball for this, because I never was called this when I was growing up in, South Central LA and playing in Compton. Me and Eric Davis and all of us and Chris Brown, and I was never called out of my name like this. And I just thought, man, this is really new just to play baseball.
Yeah, and that was added pressure on you too, Darryl, because we all remember when you were coming up, the Black Ted Williams. I mean, you were labeled as that, all of that kind of thing. So there was even more, I would think, even more pressure on you and more of that kind of thing, right?
I think it was more pressure, after I finally got to the big leagues. Throughout the minor leagues, after I experienced that, I went to Double-A, and then it was pretty good. I was in Jackson, Mississippi,
right?
And that's deep in the South too, But I played well enough there where people liked me from a different perspective. and then I came up to the big leagues, and then I had to play in New York City, and just the expectations, out of fans and stuff, and then just the way people can be. Fans at times can be cruel. And they can crush, players, and they crush a lot of black players, of saying a lot of negative things. And you just have to be able to weather the storm, I would call it, and I think I was able to weather the storm. But I think, most important, for this country as we look at what has occurred and the protesting, there's nothing wrong with peaceful protesting.
Right.
Now, when you're taking it to another level and getting out of control and you're breaking into things, stealing things, that's unacceptable, and we can't live like this. We have to be able to, have police officers and they're there to protect. And of course, we have to, you have to do something, kind of restructure or reform, the police officers, on the things that they need to do, and looking at people of colors when they pull someone over. It's not always about killing them. I think a lot of things, it's kind of been the first thought from so many of them. And a lot of times some of them have been raised with that from generation to generation. And you look at this generation that I see out there protesting, they're all color. You got more white kids out there protesting more than anything today, and it's a different time. They don't have that that kind of face that we grew up back when color was a big thing. They don't see color. They don't see if one's gay or one's black or one's this. They don't see that. They see themselves as people, and I think they are hurting more than anybody, and I think they're speaking louder than anybody. And I think it's time for this country and people to pay attention to what our younger generation is talking about, because they're the ones going to be the next generation. And I don't think they want to grow up with this same stuff that we had to grow up with.
Do you think that this is different, that this reaction we've seen over the last few weeks with protests, with athletes talking openly about these issues, that we may actually see that great change that we need as a country where we can hopefully someday eliminate racism completely? I think that's what we all dream of. But do you sense that this can be different, what you've witnessed the last few weeks?
Well, I think it can be different, with what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, when the peaceful protesting started and athletes speaking out and saying, what they feel that's deep in their heart probably for a very long time, and they just never really had anything to say about it. I think when you look at Cap, him taking a knee down, he was right. He was right. He was right for, when is it going to be some serious justice for, black killing? And that's what he was protesting about. He wasn't protesting about the flag. He was protesting about that, and now you look back on that and now you think, well, he had made a good point, because here we are again. And it's a deeper situation now. What we've seen with this country and what we've seen all over the place, we've seen the reaction of people, and they just don't accept it. They don't want to accept it like this anymore. And I think people are just really tired of the fact of seeing this happen. Police brutality has been real for a very long time, and we've kind of turned off, like I said before, guys, we turned and looked the other way. And a lot of times, because we never had it on videos, it was the police were against the person, who was being bullied by the police in those situations. But it's happened too long and too often, and I think we're at a breaking point, and I think people want to see change. I think the country really all around, from the top to the bottom, needs a whole makeover, and we need to see a complete change.
Talking, of course, to the great Darryl Strawberry, of course, my favorite Met of all time, as I've told you many times, Darryl, you know that. But there's a lot of talk about defunding the police. What's your overall thoughts on that?
My overall thoughts, you cannot defund the police. There's no way. The crime rate would go through the roof if we defund the police. That's just like saying, okay, if you have a business, you might as well keep it closed because they're going to take everything anyway.
Right.
So we got to be realistic about, what's real and what's not real. And we got to stand up to what's real and what's not real. And I think that's where it comes into play, where I think, guys, we got to stop talking about it in this country, and we need to be about it. I think we get a lot of channels on the news that talk about it, and a lot of people, different channels and outlets, media outlets, they instigate a lot of stuff to continue to go, and this is the way it should be. That's not the way it should be. We got to be about change as people at some point in time, because if you don't change what you've just seen, you're going to see it all the time, and it's going to get bigger and bigger.
Right.
It's not going to go away, because I think what has happened on this last situation with George Floyd, it's exploded everywhere, and it could be just the beginning of what you see if this continue to go on. But if you make some changes, and I think people really out there really do just want peace, and African Americans, we really just want peace. Athletes are tired of seeing another one killed by a police officer. They can't take it, and nothing's really never happening, and you look at a lot of these cases, what really happens is most officers never get arrested. And I think when you look back on the Rodney King, that was the beginning of one situation that didn't have to be. They didn't have to beat him like they did, but they got caught on camera, and there it was. And now every time it happens, someone will film them, doing something, and this situation just occurred where George Floyd lost his life. It lost his life. With the officer, the guy is kneeling down on him with a knee on his neck, and he's telling him he can't breathe. And you got three other officers standing there around. How can the one officer? I don't care who you are. If that's me, I'm knocking him off of him and telling him you can't do this. And you can't stay there, and you just can't accept that. And people saw that, and people just like, that was it. I mean, that was just the breaking point for so many people.
It was disgusting. I mean, I think 99.9% of us who saw this are just disgusted by it, and we're haunted by it. We're talking to the great Darryl Strawberry. Today is the MLB draft. Do you remember how you felt that day, number one overall?
Right.
I mean, the expectations, but how you felt that day, the official call of you going number one overall, and it's going to be the New York Mets.
Well, I was excited about it. My mom dropped me off to school that morning, and I knew it was draft day, and I just kind of figured I was going to be drafted somewhere. I didn't know exactly where. I just knew a lot of scouts had talked to me, and the Mets were really talking to me and considering me, and they were considering me or Billy Beane. It wasn't for sure which one. And but I'm just saying that's what it was. When
for once, they made the right choice, Darryl. Not often they do.
Well, thank you, Joe. Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that, brother.
I mean, come on.
And they picked me, and then they went on to pick Billy and Johnny Gibbons in that first round too. So I remember I was in class, and I remember them getting me out of class and coming and pulling me out of class and taking me over to the baseball field area, and the coach said, there was a photographer there. And had a hat. They wanted me to put on a hat. It was a New York Mets hat. They said, you've been selected by the New York Mets. And I was thinking to myself, what the heck is New York at? It's like, because I had never been out of California. And I just, never been to a place like New York or anything like that. And, but I was excited. I was excited that I was drafted, and I wanted to get going. I wanted to get going to show that I was going to be a baseball player. I wanted to play baseball. And when I realized, what kind of place I was going to be playing in a city like New York, when I started to realize that, as I started to develop through the minor leagues, and they started, hyping me up, and I went to spring training that one year. It was a big league camp, and had such a great time and performed well. And the older players were just looking at me and like, man, this kid don't even know how good he is. He just hit 2 home runs, and there's nothing to him. I was like 20 years old, 21 years old. So I really wasn't thinking about it. They were thinking about it. So I ended up coming there and really making it to the big leagues and playing at such a high level. And, it was just so exciting to be able to play in front of New York fans. I just, I love Met fans forever. They made my life. They made me become the player I was, regardless of all that happened in between and after that and where I ended up playing at. If it had not been for playing in front of Met fans, I probably would have never been the player I was. I became very successful because of the drive of Met fans. It had nothing to do with people in the front office had to do with the fans coming to the ballpark, pushing me and making me believe in myself.
You know, one of the – I'm talking to the great Darryl Strawberry, and I think I probably told you this, but one of the worst – you know the kind of Met fan obviously I am, and Evan is too. But unfortunately, Evan didn't get a chance to see you play, with the Mets. But Darryl, when the day that you walked to go to the Dodgers, and it was so much, it was all rumored, it was all going that way. And I remember, I kept trying to tell myself, nah, they're gonna make it, they're gonna get it done, they're gonna get it done. I kept trying to humor myself, even though I knew everything I was reading was that you were gone, you were leaving, you were gone, and that was as a Met fan, one of the worst moments that I can ever remember for me as a Met fan. How about that whole thing and how you just wound up going to Los Angeles?
Well, it was very, very sad for me because they didn't really give me a choice. Because you know what happened? Right. I was having such a great year during the course of that year, and they could have signed me. That 1990 year, I was on fire.
Yep.
And I was playing well, and they could have signed me, and they didn't. They let me get to the point of filing for free agency, and that was the pushing point over the cliff. They didn't even try to negotiate during that process, and I was like to myself, and several players were like in the dugout outside when I was having such a good year. They was like, "They gonna let you walk?" I was like, "Hey, that's on them." I just got to keep playing, and it came to that point where the year was over, and they let me file for free agency. And you should never let your player that you really think is going to be a great player for the franchise and stick around get to that point. And had they never let me gotten to that point, I would have still been in Met. I would probably wore a uniform forever had they never pushed me out the door. But I just seemed like I was being forced out of the door. The general manager, he had a chance and opportunity. Owners had a chance and opportunity to say, well, we don't really want to let this happen. He's going to be here. And I kind of wish they would have stood up and said that, but they didn't. So they just let me walk.
And it's not a coincidence what happened to the franchise right after that. Yeah. I mean, the team in 1990 was halfway decent. You guys were in a pennant race through September, and then 1991.
91 win team. They won 91 that year.
Yep. Yeah.
Darryl hit 37-104 that year, Darryl, I think.
Yeah, 30. Yes, I think it was something like that. Yeah. I had a good year that year, that 1990 year, and it was just all coming together. It was coming together that because I wanted to be there. I wanted to try to show them that this is the place for me. These are the kind of fans I like. I like playing here. And it just didn't work out that way. They let me get to the free agency market, and that was it.
And we've talked about a lot of this over the last few months with no sports. So we've re-examined a lot of the history of baseball and the Mets and the Yankees, and how it seemed like Frank Cashen was in a rush to break that team apart. And it started immediately upon letting Ray Knight go right after '86.
Kevin Mitchell,
the Lenny Dykstra. I mean, there's just so many, capped off by the ultimate, which is letting you go to L.A. Did you get that sense that after winning it all in '86, that Frank Cashen was all about kind of changing things? Because every year there seemed to be more and more changes. So was that a feeling you got over the years, that he couldn't wait to take that special team of '86 and change it as the years went on?
I don't really consider it was more of a Frank Cashen. It had to come from a higher place to break things up. I mean, because you think about how good we were in '86, and then immediately you start making the changes of shifting players and stuff like that, and like you said, Ray Knight left and Kevin Mitchell. Those were two great points of what our team was about. Heart and soul. Where you and where you have players, but I think they were banking on development players that were going to come through the system. Maybe we're going to be some more alike, myself and Doc Gooden, and I think they were wrong about that, because we were two different kind of players that came up at a young age and could handle playing at the level of the big league level and playing in New York City like we did, even though it was a lot of pressure, but we performed under it. Every player can't do that, and I think that a lot of times that's what the organization thought they had going forward, but they saw two of us like that. And, you had Lenny, who came in, was great. And I think that's when I started seeing players like that. When Lenny got traded, I really thought that things were really changing there, because we shipped him over to Philly and Roger over to Philly. And I realized that, and I realized that we were not headed in the right direction. I realized that we wasn't going to win again because when you start losing the heart and soul of the players that were there, that knew how to win, and you start moving them out, I knew quickly that we were in trouble because I saw the players that were coming up. They were great guys, but they were decent players, but they didn't have that tenacity, just like the players that I played with before, the way we played the game at that level and the way we wanted to win. And they didn't have that. If more guys were more concerned about how many hits they had and the average, and it was so crazy, so different compared to the players that we had before.
Did you get along with Kevin McReynolds?
Oh yeah, I got along with K-Mac. K-Mac was quiet. K-Mac was a great guy.
Really?
He was a great guy. Oh yeah, he was a great guy, a nice guy. Didn't have a whole lot to say. Play, go home, ready to get out of there. He didn't want to deal with the media. He didn't want to be fussed about fans or anything. He just wanted to play and do his thing and go home.
Yeah, Met fans don't love him. That's
I
one
don't.
thing. Yeah, Joe's one of them. Yes.
See to me, Darryl, he's the symbol of the beginning of what you're talking about, the breakup of the championship team. I mean, he's the Kevin Mitchell for this guy. What, are we kidding ourselves? Really?
Yeah, but it wasn't K-Mac's fault. It wasn't K-Mac's fault that he was traded for that for him. It was the front office fault for making those decisions. To get rid of players like Mitchell and to get rid of players like Dykstra, and you thought you'd bring some other players in. Plus, you got rid of Davey too. So I think a lot of times, Frank, I think what happened was they wanted the organization. They didn't want us to be the bad boys. They wanted us to be quiet. And it just wasn't like that with us. If you'd have just let us be the bad boys, we'd have won the more championships. There was just that time and that we were in, and that's who we were. They wanted us to all go home, and they wanted us to drink milk and be good boys. That's what they wanted us to do. I'm sorry, guys, but that just wasn't us. I know.
No, of course.
But that's what. But I think that's what they wanted.
Right.
That's what they kind of tried to make the team.
Right.
They tried to make the team switch over into, okay, we got some good players that they're very talented, and maybe they'll be able to win. But they didn't have what the team of the 86 Mets looked like, the boys that fought through in 84 and 85. They didn't have that who were frustrated when we didn't win, even though we were close and we were still young. We hated we lost in 84 to the Cubs, and we come back in 85 and lose to the Cardinals. In 86 we come back, we just roll the map off and kill everybody.
Yeah. We're talking to the great Darryl Strawberry. Couple of Yankee things I'll throw at you, and I've always said this about the 98 team. The one regular season moment that jumps out at me more than anything else, it's the moment where I said, boy, this Yankee team is the greatest team I've ever seen, was a game in Oakland in which you guys are losing 5-1. It's over. I mean, all right, the Yankees are actually going to lose a game. And here comes Darryl Strawberry with a game-tying. I think it was a game-tying grand slam.
Right. Yeah.
And then the Yankees end up scoring 9 runs in the ninth inning, and you guys win 10-5.
I think I actually had Darryl on that night.
Really?
I was doing the overnight back then, and I think Darryl might have came on that night, Darryl, after you hit that in Oakland that time.
It was a West Coast game. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I might have. I mean, it was just a fun Yankee team. I mean, like I said, but what the Yankees did over there was they developed real well. I could tell you that. And I kind of wish, that's people always ask me, well, what's the difference? I said, well, why are the Yankees more successful? Well, because they develop homegrown players and very talented homegrown players. And I said that's what the Mets used to do. We used to have a lot of homegrown players, develop, but they did develop Wright and Reyes, which was a great combination. But they needed to stay in that place of developing their good young players, and I think they got away from that and got into like the free agency market and end up losing and not drafting. I mean, you stop drafting when you stop drafting. A 4-2 player, a 3-2 player like that, then you don't really have a whole lot, and I think that's what made the difference of the Yankees organization and Mets. Mets, coming out of the Yankee organizations, you had 4-2, 3-2, 5 players, players that could play, and that's what you've gotten away from, and the Mets have gotten away from that, and that's why it's been like that. Because when I was coming up, we had a lot of players in the organization that could play. There was a lot of talent there, so they were able to be able to mix and match, and get and develop guys, and you develop some pretty good guys. Remember, Kevin Elster came to the minor league.
Right,
He wasn't all that heavy of a hitter, but he was a great defensive player. And stuff like that. He could play. He hit a little bit here and there, but you look at his defense was so solid. And up the middle, having that combination of up the middle and double plays, all those things are important to your team. And I think a lot of times people don't understand that.
You know what the Mets need that the Yankees have? Good ownership. And maybe when they sell, which the Wilpons are going to sell soon, maybe that'll be a big help. That's what we're hoping for.
Before I let you go, Darryl, how's you and Doc getting along? How you getting along with him?
Yeah, I just saw him the other day. We just did something with Howie yesterday on about the draft. Me and Doc and Mike was on there talking to SNY. Did a little bit yesterday, so he's doing well, doing good. I'm glad he's doing well.
Good,
great to hear.
Great to hear.
Darryl, really great talking to you. We appreciate
Darryl, it's always a pleasure. I really appreciate it, man. You had when I was doing the Saturday show for a little while, you came out with me one morning. I really appreciate it, and you know it. My favorite Met of all time. There was nothing. You never missed you at the plate. Never, ever, ever. You were hitting. I had to see it.
Well, I appreciate you, Joe. I've always loved you, man. We've always had great conversations, when we were working over at the studio. So you've always been a great guy, and I appreciate you, brother.
All right, man. Darryl, you be well. Be
safe,
your family, everybody. It's great talking to you.